Why is her monitor unplugged? The alarm beside my premature daughter's bed was screaming before anyone answered me. Sophie looked impossibly small beneath the NICU blanket, her tiny chest rising while numbers flashed across the screen. Then I saw the cord. It wasn't in the wall. My brother Ethan's phone charger was. Mom barely looked concerned. He has an important call, Chantel. You unplugged Sophie's equipment for his phone. It was only for a minute. I lunged toward the outlet. Dad stepped forward. Calm down. Your mother didn't do anything terrible. A nurse rushed through the door as I pulled Ethan's charger free and reconnected the monitor. Then Sophie's oxygen reading started dropping. Everyone stepped back, the nurse ordered. Dad actually shook his head at me. Stop overreacting. Bobbies are tough. But seconds later, the nurse looked at my parents differently. And suddenly, nobody cared what Dad thought. I stood beside Sophie's bed while the nurse checked her readings. She adjusted the equipment, watched the screen, then called for another staff member. Is she okay? I asked. We're watching her. Stay right here with her. Mom tried moving closer. The nurse raised one hand. Everyone except Mom needs to step outside. Mom stared at her. Excuse me, we're her grandparents. I understand. Please step outside. We came all this way to see her. Another staff member entered. That was when Mom finally realized the nurse wasn't negotiating. Ethan silently pulled his charger away from the outlet. A minute earlier, his supposedly important phone call had mattered enough for Mom to interfere with Sophie's monitor. Now he wouldn't even look at me. Sophie had been born at 30 weeks. For weeks, I had watched every number, every breath, every tiny improvement. The oxygen saturation monitor mattered because Sophie could have sudden drops that needed immediate attention. My parents knew that. Yet Mom had looked at an outlet connected to my premature daughter's equipment and decided Ethan's dying battery was the bigger emergency. When Sophie's numbers finally stabilized, my knees almost gave out. I expected Mom to apologize. Instead, as she passed me on her way into the hallway, she leaned close. You've embarrassed this entire family over a phone charger. I stared at her. You unplugged my daughter's monitor. And she's fine, Mom whispered sharply. Look at her. Dad stood behind her with the same irritated expression he used whenever I refused to give Ethan what he wanted. The nurse stepped between us. Mrs. Brooks, outside, please. Mom walked away, muttering under her breath. I turned back toward Sophie. Then the nurse closed the door, lowered her voice, and looked directly at me. Chantel, I need you to answer something carefully. My stomach tightened. She glanced toward the disconnected cord, then toward the hallway where my parents were waiting. Did you give anyone permission to disconnect that equipment? No. The word came out before the nurse finished lowering her clipboard. I never gave anyone permission to touch Sophie's equipment. She nodded. Then I need you to tell me exactly what happened. With Sophie stable again, my parents and Ethan were kept outside while I explained everything. And the more I talked, the less this felt like one careless moment. Since Sophie had entered the NICU, Mom had complained constantly about the rules. You're becoming too controlling, she'd told me whenever I reminded her to sanitize her hands or wait for a nurse before touching anything. Dad always backed her. Your mother raised 2 children, Chantel. She knows what she's doing. But there was one detail the nurse needed to hear. Minutes before the alarm, Ethan had held up his phone. 2%, I need to make this work call. Mom had pointed toward the outlet beside Sophie. I immediately said, no, don't touch anything connected to her equipment. The nurse stopped writing for a moment. You specifically warned them. Yes. That changed everything. When I stepped into the hallway, Mom was waiting. You're really reporting us. You heard me tell you not to touch that outlet. The monitor has backup power. That wasn't your decision to make. Mom folded her arms. You're trying to make me sound dangerous. Why couldn't Ethan charge his phone somewhere else? Her answer came instantly. Because he needed it then. I just stared at her. There it was. 30 years of family rules compressed into one sentence. If Ethan needed something, everyone else adjusted, even my premature daughter. Dad stepped closer. Enough, Chantel, Sophie is fine. Before I could answer, footsteps approached. The NICU charge nurse stopped in front of us with another staff member. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks. Mom straightened. Yes. The nurse reached toward their visitor badges. I need these back. Mom instinctively covered hers with her hand. What? The nurse removed Dad's badge first. Until this incident has been reviewed, neither of you is permitted to re-enter the NICU. Mom's face went blank. For once, telling me I was overreacting couldn't make the consequence disappear. Mom's shock lasted about 3 seconds. Then her voice carried halfway down the NICU hallway. You're banning us because Chantel threw a tantrum over a plug. A couple sitting near the waiting area looked up. 2 nurses at the station went quiet. Dad stepped toward the charge nurse. Give us our badges back. We're the child's grandparents. That does not authorize you to interfere with medical equipment, the nurse said. Mom's expression shifted. I didn't know it was medical equipment. I thought it was an unused cable. I stared at her. You just told me the monitor had backup power. She opened her mouth, but Ethan spoke first. Mom. She turned toward him. I told you my battery was dying, he said quietly. I never asked you to unplug Sophie's monitor. Mom looked stunned. I was helping you. I know, but don't put this on me. For the first time, Ethan wasn't letting her use him as an excuse. I faced the charge nurse. I warned her before she touched it. I said, don't touch anything connected to her equipment. The nurse who had rushed into Sophie's room stepped forward. When I entered, the monitor was disconnected from wall power, and his charger was occupying that outlet. Dad scoffed. That proves nothing except that a charger was plugged in. The charge nurse remained calm. Sir, staff observations are not the only information reviewed in a patient safety incident. Dad stopped talking. Mom did too. That was the moment I saw her confidence disappear. 2 hospital security officers arrived moments later. They didn't threaten anyone or put anyone in handcuffs. They simply informed my parents that they needed to leave the restricted unit while administration reviewed the incident. Mom looked around at the nurses, Ethan, and the strangers who had heard everything. Then she looked directly at me. If you let them throw us out over this, don't expect us to forgive you. The security officer gestured toward the exit. And for the first time in my life, Mom had no choice but to go. I didn't follow my parents. I went back to Sophie. Her oxygen readings had stabilized, and the steady rhythm of the monitor was the only thing I wanted to hear. I sat beside her incubator until a woman from patient safety entered. Chantel, can we talk about what happened? She showed me the hospital's monitoring record. This system logs power interruptions, alerts, reconnections, and your daughter's readings. The timeline was painfully clear. The monitor lost wall power. An alert followed. Then Sophie's oxygen level declined during the same window, requiring the nurse to respond. Are you saying unplugging it caused her oxygen to drop? I asked. No, she said carefully. We can't establish that from this information. What we can say is that her monitoring was interfered with during a period when her oxygen level was declining. That creates a serious safety concern. That distinction somehow made everything worse. Mom hadn't caused every number on that screen. She had simply decided she had the right to interrupt the equipment watching those numbers. I gave a formal statement. I included the warning I had given before Mom touched the outlet. Then Ethan gave his statement separately. He confirmed hearing me say, "Don't touch anything connected to her equipment." There was no misunderstanding left to hide behind. Mom knew. She heard me. She unplugged it anyway. I looked at the patient safety representative. I want both my parents removed from Sophie's approved visitor list, regardless of what the review decides. She nodded. And I want them removed as emergency contacts. I can help you arrange that. I signed the changes. My phone started vibrating almost immediately. Mom. Dad. Mom again. I turned it face down without answering. They had spent years assuming they could pressure me until I gave in. This time, every call arrived after the decision had already been made. The door opened. The patient safety representative stepped back into the room carrying paperwork. Chantel, we've completed the initial review. She pulled a chair toward mine. There's something you need to know before your parents are allowed back into this building. The patient safety representative placed the paperwork between us. The initial review supports your account. I looked down at Sophie, then back at her. She walked me through the sequence. The monitor had lost wall power. Ethan's charger had been found occupying the outlet immediately afterward. Staff had witnessed the condition of the equipment when they entered, and Ethan had independently confirmed that I explicitly warned everyone not to touch anything connected to Sophie's equipment. Most importantly, Sophie's oxygen level had declined during that same window. We are not saying your mother caused the oxygen decline, she explained, but deliberately interfering with monitoring equipment during a decline created an unacceptable safety risk. What happens now? Your parents' visitation privileges are being revoked. I sat completely still. For years, Mom and Dad had treated my boundaries as arguments they could win. Now they couldn't talk their way past the NICU doors. Later, I agreed to meet them outside the unit with the hospital representative present. Mom started before I could sit down. I never meant to hurt Sophie. I know. Her shoulders relaxed. Then I continued. But that isn't the issue. Her expression hardened again. I told you not to touch my baby's equipment. You heard me and decided my answer didn't matter. It was a mistake. No, a mistake would have been not knowing. I warned you. Dad leaned forward. Families make mistakes, Chantel. Families forgive each other. I looked straight at him. If a stranger unplugged Sophie's monitor to charge a phone, would you be standing here telling me it wasn't a big deal? He said nothing. I waited. Still nothing. Then Ethan spoke from beside them. You should have apologized when the alarm went off. Mom turned sharply. Ethan. No, Mom. I said my battery was dying. I didn't ask you to unplug anything. And when Chantel got scared, you both attacked her instead of admitting you were wrong. Mom stared at the son she had spent years putting first. This time, even Ethan wouldn't defend her. The hospital kept the incident in its internal safety documentation. Mom and Dad remained barred from visiting Sophie, and I kept both of them removed from every authorized medical contact list. I also gave the NICU clear instructions. No information about Sophie was to be shared with them without my permission. There were no dramatic arrests, no ridiculous courtroom showdown. The consequence was simpler. They lost access. They lost trust. And they lost the ability to use the words "were your parents" as permission to override me. The calls kept coming for a while. I stopped letting them change my decisions. Weeks later, Sophie finally became strong enough to leave the NICU. I carried her through those hospital doors myself, bundled safely against my chest. Ethan had apologized. Because he accepted his part instead of defending what happened, I eventually allowed him limited contact with Sophie. My parents remained outside the family circle I was building around my daughter. Maybe one day they would understand why. Maybe they wouldn't. But reconciliation was no longer something they received automatically because we shared blood. As I carried Sophie toward home, I understood exactly what had changed. I wasn't the daughter asking her parents to respect her anymore. I was Sophie's mother, deciding who was safe enough to be near her. My parents thought the worst consequence of unplugging my baby's monitor would be me getting angry. Instead, it was the moment they lost the right to decide that my boundaries didn't matter.